Let's go to Matthew 5 and stand when you get there if you would. We'll read about 10 verses here. Matthew chapter 5, famous Sermon on the Mount. We'll start at verse 38. Matthew 5:38, stand and I'll read it to us. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, for whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor, and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the just, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Amen. You can be seated. I'm going to preach the title of the message tonight is Doing Your Part and a Little More. And I don't know, a Wednesday night, the faithful crowd, the ones who already give everything they can give, sounds like one of those sermons. It kind of reminds me when I worked at different jobs. UPS is one of them that I make reference to a lot, but I remember they would work us to death. And then we would show up, and they would be like, all right, guys, we need to do a little bit more. And it's just like, hey, you can only get so much out of me. You know, you can't get blood from a turnip. I don't know, does that even apply? Anyway. And so, so I acknowledge that. I understand that I'm talking to the crowd that does a lot. This is just a biblical principle, though, that we need to always remember. This is what Jesus taught, and this is what Jesus preached. And so I guess on one hand, the purpose of the message is to encourage us to do our part plus a little more. And then the second is if you're already doing all you can and you find yourself being tempted to say, look, I already do more than my share, well, this is good encouragement to let you know, hey, that's what you should be doing. I know it might get hard sometimes, but that's just what Jesus wants us to do. And so I've heard this growing up. My dad was, in the military, and so I think he maybe picked it up there. Maybe he picked it up from his parents. I don't know, but he said every time we would go somewhere, he would say, like, leave it better than we found it. Anybody heard that? So if we went camping and, you found a little trash on the ground or whatever, well, when it was time for us to leave, he was like, we're not like leaving that just because we didn't put it there. We're picking up our stuff, but then we're going to do more, and we're going to make sure that it's better than we found it. So, that would even go into like stay at a hotel, and it's like, hey, we're going to clean this thing up whenever we're done. And I'm like, hey, we pay people. I didn't actually say this, but you're thinking like we pay people to. Part of our bill is to pay people to come clean this, And then why are you making the bed? They're just going to tear it down. I hope tear it down and wash it anyway. So why are you going above and beyond? It was because it was this principle that says, hey, we want to not just do our part, cleaning up our mess, but we want to do a little extra as well. And really, that's a good mentality to have. It's a good work ethic, if nothing else. But this is what Jesus taught in the Bible. Like, this is pretty much what the Sermon on the Mount, this is like the focus, the emphasis of the Sermon on the Mount. He says, don't just realize, when somebody does wrong to you, don't just retaliate against them. He says, but also offer them more, right? They smite you on your cheek. You're tempted to get even with them. You say, okay, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to let that one slide. I'm going to show mercy. No, he says, and then offer them your other cheek. You want to slap this side too? That goes totally against what our natural tendency would be and what we'd want to do. He says, if somebody sues you, don't just give what he sues you for, that seems already more than, any of us want to do. He says, also give him more. He sued you for your cloak. Give him, he sued you for, what was it? Cloak, which is the under, what do you call that thing? Not the cloak. The cloak is the outer garment. Let me just read it again. What does he say? Give your coat. Give him your cloak also. Sorry, I was thinking the other way around. I was thinking, anyway. So don't just give him your coat on the outside, but give him your lesser garment as well. Anyway, you get the point. Why would I want to do that? Like if somebody asks for my coat, I'm just like, hey, go get your own coat. That would be our natural tendency. Our desire would be like, hey, I worked for this. I bought this. I like this coat. And he says, they ask for your coat, give it to them, and then give them your cloak also. Got a little mixed up there, sorry. So, and then verse 40, he says, verse 41, he says, if somebody compels you to go a mile, go with him twain. That's not what we want to do. We don't want to go the mile in the first place. Now, there might be, some people have said that this is like, it was common for the Romans to tell a Jew to go, then they were allowed to command them to carry something for them for up to a mile. I don't know where that's written or where they got that information, but that's just what I've heard. And so if they did that, once the mile was over, theoretically, I've done my job, drop whatever it is you're carrying for them and move on. But Jesus is saying, no, decide, hey, I know that I've already fulfilled my obligation, but how about I go with you another mile? This is the mentality that Jesus was teaching that we ought to have. And you say, oh, no, he's Jesus, he's perfect, so that's why he did it. Yeah, but he also asked us to live this way and try to imitate him and try to do these things. He says, don't just love your neighbors, those who live next to you and those who you have to learn to get along with. That's your part, right? But he says, no, love your enemies. That's going above and beyond. That's hard. That's doing your part plus a little more. And whenever I preach that concept and preach this text, I always feel like I need to make a little bit of a disclaimer to say, no, that doesn't mean just 100% of the time we're just giving anything that somebody asks us for and we're going the extra mile for everything they do. That can't be the case. Jesus didn't even always do that. There were some times where he did not give people what they asked for, and he did not always love his enemies. For example, he says something, he didn't demonstrate that love towards them anyway. He didn't always say things that, what's the word I'm looking for? The soldiers, when they come, like, well, he did. He healed Malcolm's ear, So he did demonstrate some love, but what I'm getting at is that doesn't mean that he didn't stand against evil. It doesn't mean that he encouraged and enabled somebody who was not working, and they're being lazy, and so they ask you for something. No, that's not what we're talking about, because there's a lot of biblical principles that say that we need to correct those things, and we need to tell people, teach them how to work, have a work ethic, and if they don't work, they shouldn't eat, all those kinds of things. So, some people could read into this and just say, hey, this is, number one, it's a fantasy world because none of us could ever do this 100% of the time. And others might just use that as a weapon against anybody who does something they don't like. But Jesus said to do this. And the reality is we have to use our brains. There are times where we can't do these things or it wouldn't even be right to do these things. But Jesus is teaching this principle that says this is what you should strive for. This is what you should want to do. If you have the opportunity to go with somebody a mile and time allows and resources allow, ask them if you can go twain. You know what I mean? This is the heart that Christ had. So I just want to make that clear as I'm teaching this, that nobody thinks, that I'm asking for some kind of impossibility, okay, or contradiction or something like that. But like I said, it's one of those sermons that I feel like, man, I'm asking more from people who already give so much. But then I got to thinking about this. When I played sports, it was that way. I already mentioned UPS. My work was that way. We come in, it's just like, hey, I gave 100% last night. You can't give more than 100%. I know people always say, give 110%. That's not, you understand that's not mathematically possible, right? You can only give 100%, and then that's it. That's the top that you can go. All right? So, but that's just the reality. Coach is like, hey, you got to give a little bit more. You're not actually giving 100%. You need to give a little bit more, you know. And businesses do that, and coaches do that for their sporting team, and this is just, it's natural then that Jesus, our coach, if you will, our master would say, all right, guys, I know you're doing a lot, but have this mentality that says I'm going to do my part plus a little bit more. Now, I want to give just a few points about that, and like I said, more kind of motivation for us when the opportunity presents ourselves, that we'll take that extra mile, do a little bit more, but also if you are doing it, just to encourage you and to explain why this is important, why we need to do this, okay? So number one, the sad reality is that doing extra is needed because not everybody does their share, okay? Does that make sense? The reason that it's required that we do our part plus a little more is because not everybody does their share. That's just the reality of it. Now, let me break it down a little bit further. Do you know that even if everybody did their part in any unit, any organization, any movement, you know, obviously we can apply it to the church, but anything, if you only did your part, what was required of you, you know that the organization wouldn't grow any. That would just break even. Everybody did their part, and now it just break even. So technically, you know, even without this principle that I'm telling you that, hey, not everybody carries their weight, still, all of us should have this mentality that says, I'm going to give all, you know, I'm going to do my part, and then I'm going to try to do a little bit extra as well for the whole team, because somebody is going to drop the ball. You know, I remember in sports, particularly, I guess it was true in soccer and all these kind of, but baseball is one that I always remember. One of the things I really thought was neat as I began to learn more about baseball is that we always played our position, but then we would also, when it wasn't necessarily necessary to play our position, we would back up someone else's position, okay? So if you're on the right side of the field and all the action's going on the left side of the field, you need to think ahead, well, you know, where do I need to be in addition to whatever, you know, and so the good players were the ones that were always moving, and they're always doing more than just their fair share. It's like, well, I'll catch it when it comes to me. You know what I mean? I'll just do so. No, that's not how it works. For the whole team, you've got to be there for the other people whenever they fall. You've got to be able to do your part and a little bit more. This is the reality of it, because not everybody is going to give 100%. So just to give another example, so and the sermon is not about giving money, giving you your part plus a little bit more, okay? But it does apply. It is a principle that's in there as well. But let me just use for money for any business, okay, or any example you want to put in your mind. Let's say the bill's $1,000, and so 10 people say, all right, we're going to give $100. 10 of us are going to give $100. That would only break even, all right? The business would not grow. There would never be any more than that. You've just done your part. So we have to always think bigger than just doing our part. We need to do a little bit more. So this is where in a church, and again, the message isn't about offerings and tithes and stuff like that, but let me just throw this in here. This is why God put in the Bible, well, Jesus did too, it's his word, this principle of tithing. Everybody gives 10%, and then also principle of offerings. And that's not popular in the world. It's not popular in the average church. You'll find a lot of people who will claim that that's, you know, not for the New Testament, that's only for the Old Testament, we're not under that anymore. But you sure find giving in the New Testament as well. In principle, this is something that God set up where you'd give 10%, but then you would also give all these other things as a means, you know, to provide for everybody. And so if everybody only did their fair share, that would be breaking even. So the problem that we have, though, is when not everybody fulfills their role. Now that's requiring other people to do twice as much, 3 times as much. And you know, it's as far as the church, it's God's church. He takes care of it. We've got givers. We've got people that give above and beyond. You know, it's kind of, that's just the mentality. It's kind of like when we have a potluck. All right, everybody loves potluck. But the reality is, and it's okay, we don't expect that it's going to happen this way, but the reality is not everybody is going to bring a dish. So the principle is typically bring a meal for your family plus a little bit more, right? Isn't that kind of the understood reality? Because if somebody comes and they didn't do this, we don't want to make them feel like, hey, well, you can't take part because you didn't do your part. No, we're there. We covered you. We got your back. And so this is just the principle that why do we have to do our part plus a little bit more? Because the reality is not everybody's going to give 100%. And even if they did give 100%, we would only be breaking even. You know what I mean? I shouldn't say 100%, okay? Because all of us should be shooting for 100%. It's kind of like the marriage relationship. You say, well, we're going to do 50-50. Well, that would be doing your part, okay? In the example I gave about the 1,000 and then 10 people say I'm going to do 100, like you would be doing a tenth of your job. You know, I mean, a tenth of the part, but that's your job. Okay, so it's not 100%. But we should all be willing to give 100%. You can't give more than 100%, but in a marriage relationship, if I just cut it off at 50% and said, hey, these are my jobs, these are my responsibilities, and those are your responsibilities, and if you don't get them done, that's just the end of it, that wouldn't be a good relationship. So in a marriage relationship, hey, I'm not breaking it off at 50%. I'm going to just try to be there and give of myself as much as I can in every situation. And this is true in life in every area. So Jesus teaches this for his church, for his people. He says, hey, do your part and do a little extra. You know, yeah, you can do what's required. Some people don't even want to do what's required of them. They don't even want to break even. He's saying, hey, I'm saying don't even just try to break even, but just be willing to give 100%. Give of yourself as much as you can. So the second point is this. Number one was the doing extra is needed because not everybody does their part. Number two, doing extra, having this mentality of doing your part plus a little bit more, going above and beyond, doing extra tends to be a great benefit to those who practice it. You know, I don't know if I can say that 100%, but I think that this is pretty true. If you're that kind of person that says, hey, don't just, leave it better than you got it. Always do a little bit extra, do beyond. Don't just do your job, but help other people to do their job. I remember when talking to Zachary about whenever he worked at the dairy farm. He'd get there early. And so what are you going to do? Just sit there until that person's done? No, or I guess get there early or the other person's running late, whatever the case. You could just sit there and wait for that person to get done and to leave, or you could say, I'm just going to jump in there and help them out. You see what I'm saying? You're always having this mentality to do a little bit extra and to help out a little bit more. But you know what happens whenever you have that mentality and you do that? You're getting better at what you do. You're advancing. You're getting smarter. You're getting more educated. You're getting more experience because you have that attitude that says, hey, I'm not just going to be lazy and I'm just sit back and do the least amount possible. I'm going to do above and beyond. You're going to excel, and that's going to make you a better person. Who doesn't want this type of spouse? Okay, I already mentioned the 50-50. Like, who wants the spouse that's just going to say, I cleaned my side of the table, the rest is yours? Now, sometimes that might happen, okay, but you know what I mean? Like, who wants somebody that just has that mentality? Like, I'm just going to do mine. I didn't sign up for this other part, you know what I mean? No. But the Bible teaches us of spouses who go above and beyond. In the famous story of the virtuous woman, look at Psalm 31. Psalm 31, look at verse, I think it's, not Psalm, Proverbs. Proverbs 31, woman. Not Psalms. All right, Proverbs 31. Look at verse 10. Who can find a virtuous woman? for her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ship. She bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, and when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen and selleth it, delivering girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done wondrously, but thou excellest them all. It doesn't, just to be the wife and to meet the wife standards, it's doing your part. I'm pretty easy to please when it comes to, for instance, food. Now, I like good food. I can appreciate good food. Don't get me wrong. But the reality is, you could put a bologna sandwich on my plate, and I'm probably going to eat it, say thank you, and go back to work. Okay? So my wife could easily just, hey, here, I fulfilled my duty. I gave you something to eat. Your food's in the microwave, whatever. She could just simply do that. But she doesn't do that. She goes above and beyond. And I'm telling you, every man wants that kind of a wife. And the reality, too, is every wife wants that kind of a husband who's not going to just sit back and just do, his the least amount that he could do. Ruth was very happy to have Boaz, who did above and beyond. You know what I mean? He went the extra mile. He didn't just take her in and just say, okay, I'll take care of you, fulfill the levirate vow. But he went above and beyond. And so this is obviously what would make a good spouse, and what would make, another example, you don't have to turn there, but another example is Rebekah. Now the servant, Isaac's servant, went to go get, to go find a spouse for his master, and he prayed before he went there, and he's like, Lord, whoever it is that when I ask for water, they also water my camels. You remember that? And so when he went, that's exactly what happened. He sat down. She said, here's your water. She could have just been like, I did more than enough. But she says, I'm going to take the time to go fetch the water and to feed all of your camels. And everybody knows camels drink a lot of water. Okay, so she went above and beyond, and he was like, oh, this is the one. This is going to be the wife for my master. And so this is the principle that is all throughout the Bible, but really, if you think about it, it's just something that will benefit you. It's something that will make you a better person. It's something that, it's going to get a whole lot more accomplished because you've got this mentality like, I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to do a little bit more. I'm going to, these types of people tend to be more organized, cleaner, healthier because they go above and beyond. And really, it makes people like you more because people want to be around those people who are not just going to do their fair share and then that's it. Now, be careful being the one who does everyone else's job for them so that they like you more because you do their job for them. That's not necessarily right. Go back to that disclaimer I gave at the beginning. There are times where you have to use wisdom, and it's godly to not do some of these things. Because if you just do someone's work for them all the time so that they'll like you and they're taking advantage of you, it's not helping them out one bit. Okay, so, but it is true that somebody is going to like you more and care more for you because of the fact. And I'll say this, as a husband, when my wife is going above and beyond, it reminds me, hey, I need to do a little bit more too. And so as a unit, we can get more accomplished because we both have that mentality. All right, this is a biblical principle. Jesus says for us to do our part and a little more. Number 3, even if it doesn't make you more like person, even if it didn't get more accomplished, even if it didn't make you a better person and to be, more experienced and more trained, all those kinds of things, which it does, but even if you didn't get any of those benefits, I mean, if you go back and think about the things that Jesus said, and he, is teaching people to be meek and teaching them to, be defrauded and to do all these things, and it's just like, man, who wants to live that kind of lifestyle? Now, but somebody might say, okay, all right, I'm willing to sacrifice that. I'm willing to give a little bit extra if it's going to make me more popular, if it's going to make people like me, if it's going to get me something in the end. For example, you're at work and you think, well, I'm just going to go ahead and go the extra mile so that I can get a promotion, so that I can make my boss like me and give me the better jobs and pay me more money and all that. Okay, so what if you do go above and beyond and you're working hard and you're doing, and you don't get the raise, and you don't get the recognition? Nothing goes your way. A lot of people after doing that for a little while would be like, that's it. This is I'm done with this. Like, I was doing all this extra work and I never got noticed for it. Well, that's not really why we're supposed to do it. Okay, so even if we don't get any of those other benefits from going the extra mile, we're doing it for the Lord. And the Lord sees it. This is what we have to keep in mind. All these things Jesus is saying, hey, turn to the other cheek. Well, but then that person is going to get away with it, and he didn't get what he deserves, and all this. No. God saw it, and God saw your heart, and God knows why you turned the other cheek. Well, that guy, I went the extra mile, and he didn't deserve it, and he just wasted all my time. And well, God saw that. And God knows why you did it. He knows that it wasn't convenient for you and you didn't want to do it, but you did it anyway. So you're doing it for God. You're not doing it for, but now you should do it for the people you love as well. But look, he said even love your enemies. No, who wants to do this for their enemies? What's that going to benefit you? Well, because God is the one who sees this. Look at Hebrews chapter 6. Why do we want to live as Christians, the ones who have to do more than the average person? Because that's the reality of it. The average person is not going to go the extra mile, which is one of the reasons in the lesson that we have to go the extra mile, because not everybody's going to. But here's why we need to do it no matter what. Even if everybody was doing more than their share, we should still have that mentality. Chapter 6, verse 10. For God is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love, which ye have showed toward his name, in that ye have ministered to the saints and do minister. Okay? Now that's one particular thing that he was talking about. And we talked a few weeks ago about ministering to our ministers, and that's one part of the work that we would do. But if God sees that, if God sees when you give a cup of cold water to some, one of the people that are doing his work, if God sees you giving honor to people who actually deserve that honor, well, that's great, but, that's kind of like doing what's expected of you anyway. But when he sees you giving honor to the person that doesn't deserve it, when he sees you going the extra mile even though you didn't have to, and he sees you turning the other cheek, and he sees you doing all those things, look, in the world's eyes, they might not even notice that, or they might think you're crazy for doing it, but God sees it, and if that's the reason you did it, if your motivation is to do the extra labor and to work hard to be seen of the Lord, he is not going to forget your labor. He knows he's keeping tabs, and he's going to reward us for all that in heaven. If not on this earth, he might very well reward us on this earth. Now, of course, God himself sets this type of example for us. Ephesians 3, I'll just read it to you. Ephesians 3, verse 20 and 21 says, Now unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to his power that worketh in us. Okay, so we understand that God has promised for those who seek first the kingdom of God, those who love him, and those who are just going to serve him, he promised, I'm going to give you food and I'm going to give you raiment. I'm going to supply your needs. I'm going to go ahead and give you bread. I'm going to give you daily bread. Right? Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Right? And then the prayer goes on and he says, give us this day our daily bread. You know, how many of you guys, well, Lord, I just want a piece of bread today. Would you just give me a piece of bread? Well, if he did, he'd be a good God for providing it for us, and we'd be thankful for that, and he took care of his end of the bargain, but we get way more than bread. He supplies our needs way more than just our necessary food. He supplies our need abundantly beyond. We can enjoy the things in life so much on this sin-cursed earth. Imagine what he's going to do in heaven, the rewards he's going to give us in heaven or in the millennial kingdom. Okay, but he is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask. And he does. There's no doubt about that. He doesn't have to do that, but he wants to. And so he's asked that he's also done that as an example, that we would pick up where he, left off. Whenever he went to heaven, he says, hey, this is the life that you're going to do. People are going to know you're my disciples by the way you show love to one another. They're going to know that you're a servant of me whenever they see you sacrificially giving to people and doing above and beyond, going the extra mile. All these things that we read on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, hey, do your part, do a little bit more. God's going to see that. He's going to bless you for it. So not only do we have to do that because so many people aren't going to be doing their part, so we have to do more. But doing more is going to make us better people anyway. We don't want to be lazy and just barely get by, but doing above and beyond is going to make us better people. And then finally, even if it doesn't, even if there's no benefit for going above and beyond, you don't get the raise, you don't get the recognition, do it for God because God sees it, he's recording it, and he won't forget your labor. All right, let's go to Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for demonstrating to us so much grace and mercy and so much care that you have for us and giving to us above and beyond what we ask. And Lord, sometimes we ask for so much that we don't deserve. But I pray, Lord, that you'll help us be content with what you give us and certainly recognize that you give us above and beyond. I pray you help us to give to others in the same way. You gave to us freely. Help us freely to give to others and to do the best we can, lay down our lives for one another and to give that kind of sacrificial love. I pray you help us do our part and much more and be glorified in it and blessed accordingly. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.